morning, in the huddle of dirty blankets back of his canvas booth, he automatically felt for the bottle he had tucked within easy reaching distance the night before. When he settled down to sleep at night, he took one last swig and sighed his way into mildly drunken and happy dreams. He was known only as Amby. Many years before, he had had a longer and more dignified name, but he had forgotten it long since. He wasn't quite sure who he was or where he'd come from or how he'd landed as a sketch artist on the pier, and he didn't particularly care. Sketching, he was hardly aware of his surroundings. The flashing lights from the big wheel didn't divert his attention from the girl sitting on the high stool in front of him. He reached for a brown crayon, a blue crayon, a pink crayon. The laughter from the fun house, the rumble of the roller coaster, and screams from its passengers didn't bother him as he worked, because he didn't hear them. He was doing a little mental arithmetic as he worked. 50 cents, $1, $1.50, $2, $2.50. This would make 3. Minus 50 cents for food tomorrow. Amby decided that as soon as he'd finished the picture of the brown-haired girl, he'd quit for the night and buy a bottle of gin. He finished it just as the wheel was slowing down. Amby wasn't much of an artist, but the picture was a fair likeness. At least, the girl seemed satisfied with it. She gave him his 50 cents, took the picture, and rolled it up. Just as the wheel stopped, she disappeared into the crowd. Amby, closing up for the night, ignored the crowd that always gathers to watch an artist at work. He couldn't hear the comments, and he couldn't have answered them if he'd wanted to. Amby was deaf and dumb. From the very top of the wheel, it's possible to see for miles around. There is the ocean. There is the beach, with its long strings of lights, and the city beyond. And, looking down, there are the crowds milling around on the pier. The young man in one of the cabs of the big wheel wasn't looking at light, ocean, or crowds. He was far too busy searching the motionless man next to him. It was a quick but careful search, one that had to be carried on when that particular cab was at the top of the wheel. He found nothing. That puzzled him. He sniffed. Funny, he told himself. Never would he have expected this guy to be a sucker for perfume. The wheel began its downward movement. The searcher was a man of average height and slender. He had a thin, dark, saturnine face showing under a snap-brim hat. He wore a belted camel's hair topcoat over his well-tailored pinstripe suit. The wheel went on turning. One by one the cabs came down, and customers climbed out, breathless and giggling, or stayed on for another ride. The bored attendant took up their tickets or helped them out onto firm ground again. The cab in which the young man had been riding came down to the loading platform. He hopped out, grinned at the attendant, slipped him a ticket, and said, "My friend wants to go around again, Joe." The wheel moved on. Out in the crowd someone said, "That guy must be a sucker for rides. This makes the 3rd time he's been around." Instead of heading into the pier itself, the young man turned a corner behind the wheel. It led him into a rear entrance of the penny arcade. He spent a few minutes there, just another customer. At the far end of the arcade, just beyond the Gorilla's Bride, he had to go out onto the main walk again. He moved quickly, keeping his head ducked low. He turned in at a door under a sign that read, Maritza, Palmistry, Horoscopes, Numerology. There was no one in the tiny waiting room, hung with gaudy Spanish shawls, decorated with bead-fringed lamps, and heavy with the smell of cheap incense. He pushed on into the room beyond. "Hey, Mamie." The woman looked up hastily from the chair where she had been knitting and reading a comic book, and began to feel around for her shoes. She was enormously fat, and she wore what her customers trustingly believed to be a gypsy costume. Her broad brown face was elaborately made up. Her glittering eyes were ringed with mascara. "You ought to be out in front, snagging the jaspers," the young man said, grinning at her. "My feet hurt," she complained.